we started with our panel discussion, and today's first of all, welcome. Thank you for inviting us, and again, happy holidays, and here to go. I think if this summit this time, we are actually talking about the impact of the China joining ICH. So this little bit background. Prior to this 20th century, the model of this drug innovation stemmed clearly from the US leadership in drug innovation, driven by really strong public sector fundings of the US academic research. And then, of course, the availability of those capital from both public markets, VC, and then, of course, the FDA's role as the global golden standard for the regulatory approval and the high US drug price to incentivize the companies and investors to focus really on the US-centric drug development. So now, since China joining the ICH as a full regulatory member in June 2017, I think this will be an interesting discussion to talk about how does China joining this ICH impact the dynamic of the global clinical trial design. In here, we do have a few of the discussion with some of the panel discussion. Together, we have Whitney Page, we have Roger Liu, we have Xin-Yuan Fu and Oliver Kong. And so I'd like to have each one of them give about 2 to 3 sentences of their introduction, and then we dive into the discussion. Go ahead, Whitney. I see your name first.
Sure. Well, thank you. My name is Whitney Page. I'm the head of Alliance Management at G1 Therapeutics. We are in RTP, North Carolina, and are striving to impact the lives or improve the lives of those impacted by cancer, and did receive our first regulatory approval in small cell lung cancer earlier this year, and recently signed multiple partnerships with China local companies. So I'm really excited for today's discussion, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And next, do we have Oliver on the?
Hi, Alvin. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Oliver Kong. I'm Chief Medical Officer of Qilu Pharma, one of the top 5 big pharma in China. So we have 80% of generic drug, 20% biosimilar, as well as an innovative drug, which Qilu have famous for tremendous manufacturing capacity. We have top 3 hospital cell in China. So
great. Do we also have Roger? Is Roger on the call? So how about Xin-Yuan Fu?
Yes, I thank you for this great opportunity. And I would like introduce me. Maybe we can share a screen. I just using a very short introduction. So let me see if I can share that to test it. So you can see it, right? So that's me when I was young. Okay. So with my mentor, Dr. C.C. Tan Jiazhen, and he was in the pedigree of Thomas Morgan. Basically, I'm in a very good pedigree, but later on, I joined this CASP program, if you heard of this, also called WURI program. Then I graduated from the Columbia University. So with a PhD, then work as the postdoc in Jim Darnell lab. I want to give the reason why join this, have this opportunity to join this, because we are now doing a number of clinical trials, probably 4 of them, some in the United States and some in China. So it's very actively pushing this. So ICH itself is, for me, it's great resources I wanted to learn and also apply. So this great opportunity and let me to learn and also to share my opinion. So anyway, I give you this card. If you're interested in contact me later. So this is my maybe this code and also my name card. So my name is Xin-Yuan Fu. So I'm glad to have this opportunity. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I see Roger's on the call. So Roger, are you on mute or?
I can talk. Yeah, I can hear you.
Great,
Yeah.
good. Go ahead and introduce.
Okay. Yeah, apologize for running a few minutes late. I'm having a little bit hard time to connecting the internet. Anyway, good morning, good evening, depends where you are. My name is Roger Luo. I'm the head of clinical development at Overland Farm. Yeah, this is all about myself. I was born in mainland China, did my undergraduate there, and came to US, did my PhD program. Worked for a couple of big pharma, including Roche, BMS, Johnson & Johnson. And after that, I worked a few biotech in China, including Overland. It's nice to meet you all.
Great. And myself, I'm Alvin. I'm the CEO of Neurophth, and actually a gene therapy company focused on AAV, getting the first IND approval for a phase 1-2-3 clinical trial. Myself, I actually came from Shanghai Hennes, joining this since 2017. Before, I was at Therapeutics, another company for gene therapy, as well as Bayer and Biogen. I have my PhD and also my clinical research certificate at the UCSF, and also graduate also my MBA from Harvard. So let's dive in to the first question. Because after all these changes and joining of the ICH, what are some of the major changes in China regulatory? Maybe I see here Xin-Yuan, maybe you can dive in because your face right in front here. You want to talk about that? Are you on mute? Xin-Yuan?
Okay, I can go ahead. So I would like to say, for those maybe join this conference, also learn as me as a beginner to this. So ICH means to me, and maybe means to the field, is like a WTO. Maybe many years ago, when China joined the WTO, that's really changed all the standards and all the practice in some of the major companies in China. And also in some way, China gets the chance to develop it itself, and also, and in some way, greatly change the world. So now I think the ICH is play a key role like this too. I see this China now economically is basically is ranked number 2 in the world, but relatively say for the drug discovery, for the particularly for innovative drug, it's not a me too, it's not generic, but for innovative, I would say this drugs, if that can be one of the major objective for all of us now sitting here to see whether China, the pharmaceuticals, the biotechs can make a difference in the world, just like a WTO did to us and did to the world. That's what we have to understand ICH rules and follow this rule. This not just a rule, but it's an opportunity for us to push ourselves to go to world. So that's why I'm very excited. So I just give this introduction, but I would like to answer questions more than just to give the this statement. Thank you.
Yeah, we will come back with that too. How about Roger? What do you see that the impact?
Yeah, I think the based on my past 10 years observation involving the trial in Asia, clinical development in China, and also in Asia, two observations. Number one is speed. Back to 5 to 10 years ago, when we talk about China R&D, we're talking about 16-8 month R&D review approval time, right? It's so hard for China to join the global program. Really, if you look at cancer is not a country disease, it's a global disease, right? It's hard. I mean, everyone hates to say that when drug gets approved in Western, then take another 5 or 6 years get approved in China, you just can't get like almost parallel approval. I think the after joining ICH, there's a huge change. Now we all know 60 working days. Indeed, with my own experience, if you prepare a package well, quite often you can get it probably in 2 or a little bit over 2 months, which is not uncommon anymore. To me, like speed is just now kind of being big favor of China clinical development, whether you want China join global or China lead their own experiment. I think this is a huge improvement after ICH. Another one is basically about data. Because back to old days, when you try to say, well, I want to join global, or you want do your own trial in China, eventually do the partnership with global farm, right? I think that data quality is essential, right? You have to follow certain rules, really, harmonize yourself with global development before you can start the important dialogue such as partnership. These two really, I feel like strongly a huge difference before after.
And how about Oliver?
Yeah, I think Roger's already taken most of my points. Thank you, Roger. So I think definitely, I think one obvious is the legal form, right? So join the ICH. So the key is for joining the ICH is a mutual recognition. So basically, from the regulatory point of view, they need to recognize the data. Basically, FDA will recognize the data generated from China, and China will be recognized the data generated from the US or Europe. So that's the legal form. So I think that was definitely help the CDE for review, because previously we all know that, because the law and the legal constraints, so the CDE or the previous FDA have the challenge to approve the data of drug based on purely from the foreign data. So this is the traditional required bridging study or repeated study in China population. I think it gave the ICH the principle. I think mutual recognition would definitely help to speed up. So as you can see recently, the CDE approved the certain drug, and which is called the unmet need drug, purely based on the foreign data. So that really has opened the door. So for a lot of the unmet need drug with relatively short period of time, I think the shortest one is 9 months when they apply and get approval. I think that would be definitely better for the China patient. So that's one say. The other is really open the door for the data generated in China and get approved for FDA. I think BeiG demonstrate that based on the single phase 2 data, 90 patient was get FDA approval for their certificate. Right. So I think this is really the proof of the way. But I also want to say is the challenge existing, because of mutual recognition, it doesn't automatically mean the data generated in China will be acknowledged, approved by other regulatory authority. There's a certain standard, I think someone mentioned, the golden standard, that will not change. You need to really, it's core data. FDA will not change their standard regardless where data generated from. And the other thing was important to always for any regulatory or from a clinical point of view, we always need an ethnicity difference, because there's some PK, PD, dynamic different, tolerance different. So I think the solution is really do a global trial. Within the global trial, you will obviously can see the ethnicity difference, whether or not the population tolerance difference. I think the ICH guideline is really building the foundation for any company, both US company and China company, or collaborate doing together and do a global trial. I think that's the ultimate solution and speed up the drug development and the drug on the market.
Right, and Whitney.
Yeah, so I'll take it a little bit different. So instead of talking specifically of how China changed, I'll talk about how kind of globally, I think the whole paradigm of a global clinical development and regulatory model emerged. One, China, as you all have said, is a major market, accessible virtually overnight due to the increased timelines or decreased timelines, as well as the data quality that's emerging, as well as the standards that are now harmonized out of the US and EMA. So I think really that's the change that not only expedited China to go from multiple years to potentially 60 days to approval, but it also became a major player in how we considered global trials moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. So everyone. So yeah, I can say that in based on my experience as well. I think Roger said earlier too. I think when 10 years ago when I do a global trial, I do not like to have those bridging, like go to Japan and go to China. So even for an IND submission, I have to wait for 1 year to get the answer from the for China SFDA at that time. And now, clearly, with the guideline of the 60 working days and our recent one, even with a very innovative study design, the China NMPA just complete and approved within 45 working days. So this is a huge difference. Then I think people talking about the data going into submitting to either to the US or Europe, getting recognition, or taking foreign data coming into China is also very important. I think all of us is correct that too. We have to understand that in US FDA, they do have a guideline for foreign data that you conduct, but have to be, and we've been talking to FDA as well, that is you have to be follow the GCP. Then for sure. So this will come back to later on that it doesn't necessarily that China joined the ICH. That means anything you done in China, that's what Oliver said, is it will be get approval automatically. That's not true. In the past, when I was in Shanghai Hennes, when we did that, we also get inspection from outside of China, like EMA, to really look into the clinical trial, went to the site. And so I think it's such a nice way to look at how fast is changing of China. And I think that's go back to the next question, which Oliver already started to talk about, is what are some of the consideration when we actually developing a drug, either domestic or international companies? So maybe I started with Roger this time.
Yeah, I think the in the next 5 years, maybe next 5 to 10 years, the major trend for many China biotech is basically the global development. They call it go overseas. I think in order for them to do that, they must share the same principle, same clinical development foundation as Oliver just mentioned. This is ICH. Right? When you try to do this, you follow a different rule or different rule of the play different game with a different role. It's so hard to do global clinical development. That I think that's really the fundamental. Indeed, this really set up paved the road for many China biotech, if they think about like truly global development, like going to Western, whether they want to do their trial in US or whether they want to do the trial in China. Eventually, this is one molecule, one product, cannot follow different roads, generate different data set. I think this is really essential from my perspective.
Well, I guess maybe Whitney.
Sure. I mean, I think the main considerations are, how do you access major patient populations? How do you decrease costs while still accelerating timelines? And I think that global development model that Roger just spoke to, it's maximizing speed, reducing costs while still getting to those patient populations. But on top of the kind of underlying that whole thing is how are you able to deliver data across regulatory agencies by doing that? And I think that's the one piece that we're still kind of working towards figuring out. We know the regulatory agencies are changing slightly. So it's evolving by the day on how everyone can do that.
Xin-Yuan.
Okay, so as I said, I'm basically a newcomer and a student in this case. So I may ask my questions, just being specific in the cases to ask all your experts. Say, I want to mention this. One thing is Beijing, already been mentioned. The Beijing, the first drug, this made just in the Chinese clinical trial and getting approval. That's really inspiring and really encouraging. So many people being, but for the real standards, like I'm now I'm doing clinical trials in China. So the one question also being asked by my fellows when they heard I'm come to this panel discussion, the one question is, for example, whether we are now doing clinical trials, whether we should do all record in English, because normally now this trials in the Chinese, and how this can be done. This is why I want to stimulate this discussion. And the second thing is now, if you can do this clinical trial in China, also being recognized by FDA and internationally. So why are you doing this multiple size clinical trials? What's the benefit of each? So because a lot of, including our companies, wanted to do both in United States and China. That's United States is so expensive. So if that can be reached in China, and that would be much easier. I just wanted to ask you guys to give me my advice. Even I basically know, but I want to stimulate this discussion to want to hear from you to get advice too. I think it's not just my question, probably many biotech and whoever want to go to the big market in the United States and Europe must think about this.
Sure, Oliver, you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Fu. It's a very fundamental question. I think obviously your first question will be answered by clinical operation, right? Why you need to do a multiple center? Obviously, from the medical point of view, you really need the availability, because one center experience is not enough for regulatory approval. Because what the regulatory want to see is that you cannot done by one physician and one center can demonstrate any efficacy or a safety issue. That was not true, because that was the bias. So this is why multi-center, even multinational, is required by the regulatory, particular phase 3 trial. That's the clinical trial 101. That's very straightforward. I think there's no argument about that. Second is the cost. I think, yes, I think in general, China, the cost is relatively compared to US is cheaper. I think, but given the trend, I can tell you now, China is no longer cheaper anymore. I think given the other things, the cost increased because we have a boom, called the biotech boom. I think around the public feel the same pain, right? So I think it's closed, the gap is closed. I think fundamental, I think Roger pointed out, we are now looking, put the cost aside. When you develop the drug, you really need the purpose, why we need to develop the drug. No mission, because we develop drug, want this unique drug serve the patient. So in that sense, you just say, I cannot develop drug just for Chinese patient. A truly drug developer is develop drug for world population, right? So I think this is the mission. Whatever a scientist or clinician like me, my goal is develop drug can use for all the patients, regardless of where they are, right? So that's the fundamental. But truly, as Whitney says, when you do a drug development, you really need to consider a lot of factors, right? Regulatory is first, whether or not the drug eventually will be approved, because without proof, your drug is a drug sitting on the shelf, right? Second, as a marketing environment, because whether or not you can sell the drug or not. I think also you consider manufacture capacity. And also the key is whether you have a patient in the country, right? So let's say we develop a lot of drug for China, gastric cancer, liver cancer. But if you look at the United States, gastric cancer or liver cancer is a very little population we call orphan drug. So when you develop a drug globally, you really need to think about where's the market, where's the population driven. It's not just say, I want to do this country or the other country. It's really looking at your clinical development plan and the regulatory strategy. But I do agree with that. Our goal is really, if the China conducting in China, the data can't accepted by the FDA or EMA, I think it's a great advantage because we know our market and the China patient can benefit first, because by default, the patient can already access the experiment drug. So,
Roger, you want to add in?
Yeah, maybe just a few comments. I strongly echo Oliver's opinion. If you switch your mindset, you put regulatory hat on your head. You think about, when we say, well, it's large patient trial, we're talking about several hundred patients even for phase 3, right? But if you look at the mission from health authority, they need to prove based on a few hundred patients data for global, really for so much like million patients, right? So you have to make sure that that data package can, if not 100% copy paste, but reasonably represent the larger population, because once drug gets approved, it will be used across countries, right? Cross state, maybe even slightly different status. So there's a huge gap there when you have like two small trial or one center data that's going to be biased. So I think that even though from sponsor perspective, you do like to have like less center, quicker speed. You always want that, but sometimes it's all about balance, right? If you switch your mindset, sit on the FDA side, you have to think differently, because they're facing different hurdle, they're having different tasks, right? I think that's it's about a balance. You have to really think through that, reach agreement with health authority, right? In order for this drug approved, like what's a reasonable sample size, right? And what exactly your strategy? That would be a few key points to consider. Regarding the cost, I couldn't agree with all. China is not cheaper anymore. So you have to think about your development strategy, right? What exactly indication you want? Can you really leverage the country-specific patient resource in order to improve the speed? Really, if you look at quality, speed, and money, you just cannot, get all three. Sometimes you have to compromise. What is really essential here? Is it speed or patient population, indication, not just the money?
Go ahead, Whitney. You have anything?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm more of a scholar on this topic as well, so I appreciate the thoughts that both Roger and Oliver shared. The only other piece I would add is I think another factor that does play into it a little bit is the commercial plan as well. So yes, the filing is important, but running the trial, getting that data, and then the link to commercialization is also a very critical element in the equation.
So for me, just to tell you, the first question about do we have to have everything in Chinese or actually in English? Just to let you know, when I done clinical trial, I have done one trial in 19 countries and another one in 21 countries. So yes, you do have to have the electronic case report forms to be in English standard, but it can be at the background to be in their local language, but you have to link back later on for that electronic database. So just to let you know that you will require the local language, particularly in Chinese. Don't try to make a lot of free writing, because that is a nightmare for data management. In terms of what you're talking about, I do agree with Oliver and Roger too. It's no longer that China is the cheap one anymore, because it's so expensive. But I think it comes back down to, let's start from the real beginning, is when you have a product, your development plan, and are you thinking about global commercialization? And then if that's the case, single center, first of all, I would not agree, because it would be a bias for a complete pivotal trial. Then the second thing you want to think about is ethnicity differences. Is there anything? And then also, because many of the drugs in Asia, the Asian population are slightly different than the Caucasian or the Western world. So this is one thing that FDA will right away ask you. If you're not going to do a trial in US and you're going to bring in this product, then tell me, is there any ethnicity difference, and show it. So that's one thing you have to think about that as well. Then the other thing, again, I also done medical affairs. So let's let you know, to have commercial, because going different countries, sometimes we add one or two, is because to really help those investigators who eventually will be our key opinion leaders to use the drug and prescribe our drug. So in a way, we want them to get familiarized with our products ahead of time. So sometimes we do that strategy. It really depends on the market. Again, I do agree with Oliver and Roger. It's really depend coming on your development plan and your commercialization plan. So we do have another 10 or 15 minutes. Let's just dive in for two more questions. So with this new clinical development landscape, what do we see the future in China? and how what are some of the upcoming issues that you can see with even, I don't want to say anything is good or China joining ICH. What are some of the challenges? So let me flip the other way and let Roger to start with first. You see on mute?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah. I think the challenge, first of all, I think from sponsor perspective, when you talk about global clinical development, right, it's easy to talk about. You really have to prepare yourself, right? Really think about, well, in order to do this, what do I need to do, right? What can we prepare our investigator to do? You need to do some homework and really get yourself prepared. And also, I think back to point, which was already mentioned a few points, you have to really be careful, have the strategy in place. I have seen so many companies, they really cheered up for their first human trial or get IND approval for the first human trial. To me, this is just the first step of the long journey, right? Really, you're not there yet. You're just starting, right? And if you ask a bit more, like, okay, what is exactly you're looking for from this trial, right? How is that going to lead to your next development? You really don't get a good answer. Well, to me, you probably have not thought through yet. Really think about development strategy. You really make sure you have a really right strategy in place before you have the trial. To me, speed is important, but when you have the wrong direction, the better operation you do, the far wrong you're gonna go. So it really, so from my perspective, so make sure think through, right? Really think through, have the right strategy in place before you start doing anything.
And Oliver?
Yeah, I think the key is really, I think it's opportunity. I think definitely for a lot of biotech, I think you really need to have the medical or clinical consideration. Obviously, if you have a commercial consideration, that would be even better. But I think from the very beginning, you really need to position your job, and how do you do that? And second, I think is really elevate the entire China research industry. The elevate the standard, because when I work for Novartis, Roche, and Bayer, when I joined the two big China firm, I immediately know that, right? So I think that was the conception, is that even we're joined the ICH, but we're not yet in terms of the quality, the strategy,
Yes.
the conduct, and the data quality. I think is still a gap. So I think we need to recognize that. So for the China, the entire clinical research, they need to be elevated and to meet the standard. But I think it opened the door for more collaboration. I think both this is for China biotech and the US biotech, because the reason for clinical development is really combine the science and the clinician, and together, is really move forward, each utilize their strengths. I think this is the truly global development is about. I think sometimes we're more leaning to the licensing in, licensing out. That was the BD, but without the clinical plan, any licensing in, licensing out, it's just the paper deal. You cannot execute. So I think I just want to stress enough. Any BD deal, you really look at what's their clinical plan or even commercial plan. Otherwise, just paperwork.
Xin-Yuan?
This is a very important issue, I think. I fully agree with Oliver just said. So if you are not have an execution plan, that's just the paperwork. Particularly, I want to say, so why I raised the English question, just the one of those questions. Actually, currently, I'm being involving truly the hospital, like the West China Hospital, Huaxi Yiyuan. So I'm been doing this, conducting the clinical trials there. I try to tell them, say this ICH, and maybe I will continue to say this, but in general, I do see the gap. If the data I'm now is being creating, clinical data, we are doing, actually the KRAS, this very competitive, the clinical trial. So whether you want to reach international standards, there are a lot of things being have to be considered and to improve. But generally, there's I mean, the huge gap that's needed to be some kind of training. I do hope like Roger, like Oliver, you may be thinking about set up some really the training courses to help these hospitals, help those, I even can organize from the internal in the China to do something to help. Otherwise, just like Oliver said, it's just the paperwork. You know, you cannot, if you cannot execution. I particularly mentioned it's not just the clinical trial, and Oliver also mentioned, this is the chain of the all these collaborations from the very beginning of the research, like how this drug being made. You know, all these protocols, all this whether reach the ICH standard, the quality and so on. So I work with a few these CRO companies, particularly like Wuxi Pharma, this particularly the DDSU units. They have been producing our drug. So we have been monitoring very, very closely. But thank God, I don't want to do commercial here for Wuxi Pharma, but they did really international standards. I'd be very happy. Everything in English, the record, if you want to look at it, instantly they can take it. But I also talked to some other companies, it's a rising companies, the CRO, being helping, including the clinical trial. So I found that there's some kind of a gap too. So this is indeed, I think, need. We have some good example like this, but we in the clinical side, like we now have had Quincy and being help us. So I hope I'm going to check this again, whether they had all the record, both in Chinese and English, to see some part probably in English, but whether this really also the qualities and the monitoring, we try to get in the best, but whether this can be generalized to all these clinical trials doing in the China if they're ambitious to do. But I think that's the very, very big challenge. I hope you guys like can set up courses. Probably today is the good beginning for that to raise this issue. I think indeed that's not an easy issue. It's probably much difficult than WTO. When WTO go to China, but I think the Chinese people are very smart, adapted very well. But this ICH, I'm still very conservative. I said whether this can succeed depends on really I hope in the audience, there are biotech leaders, pharmaceutical, this spearhead. You need to go to international. You must study ICH rules. And also hopefully have a good example we can study. So this is the one I really want to raise this here to call people's attention. This is also I appreciate as this opportunity, at least my personal thinking to share with you. Yeah.
Great, Whitney.
Yeah, so I'll say, I mean, to make it a little bit US centric and then to convert on how that's a challenge for China, I think right now the US kind of clinical development space is rapidly evolving. We're seeing our key drivers going through a period of erosion. It includes some stagnant public sector funding. We're seeing globalization of the regulatory guidelines. There's diversification of global capital sources. We're also seeing some US domestic policy pressure on pricing. And all of that on top of it is creating a very extremely crowded clinical trial space, especially over kind of this last pandemic where we're seeing a lot of COVID-19 trials prioritized over the rest of the drug development pipeline. So what that means is I think most US companies are now looking for a more innovative global solution, and not just the large pharma players, the littler biotechs as well. And China has really emerged as that solution. So they became a leader in the space. They're able to deliver large patient populations. They give us regulatory consistency, and then accelerated approval timelines. And I think what that's converted to, as you all have mentioned, is unfortunately increased clinical trial costs, as well as more competition at sites, just as more and more companies are now moving, I think, from more US EMEA focus to also including China as kind of the standard trials where they're exploring.
Thank you. And I do agree with all the panelists said that too. I think it's really important to understand that the meaning of joining ICH, because the gap is in here is everybody in China, not many of them have done a global trial. The standard is very important. I have done clinical trial in China at that time. I have to delete a bunch of, actually have to remove and disqualify some of those patients' data because of the protocol violation. They don't understand that. So the meaning, not just only for the investigator to understand what is the GCP following the ICH guideline, but also for the sponsor and also the vendor or CRO. Many of the multinational company CRO, they represent in China, but they never participate in this big global trial and they don't lead this. So that come back time when we do the monitoring, we rely on them. But remember, FDA will not care about that because at the end, sponsor have to be responsible for that. So we put in the co-monitoring from our company and put in there. But again, I think it's a huge knowledge gap. I think that will be hopefully there will be opportunity to learn how to do a global trial and the standard, and which is very important, especially the inspection readiness when you come from when you're ready for the FDA and EMA. I think we only have a few more minutes, and I want to dive into the last question. What are some of the impacts on the venture capitals? And I think this will be going for Whitney first.
Mine's probably short and sweet. I think there's just an infusion of capital right now. Again, to my last kind of comment, U.S. biotechs are extremely attracted to now looking at partner methods or inclusion to China, and reliant very heavily on venture capitalists to do so.
Going from here for Oliver.
Yeah, I think it's very simple for any venture capital investor company or doing your homework, whether or not this company or as they have, as Roger said, it's a mindset. It's just for discovering a drug or a platform, or really want to develop a drug. And if they don't have a capacity, how do you help them? And that's the one thing. And I think the other thing is really the virtual capital can work on the collaboration between the China biotech or US biotech. Find the right partner and really, because as I said, global development, it's a need a partnership. So without partnership, it's very hard to do.
Roger?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, right now I'm sitting on the sponsor side, right? You always want venture capital invest in your company, but I was thinking about if I switch myself on the other side, when I look for a potential company I want to invest money, I would say I will definitely look at their pipeline carefully, whether a product's really competitive and suitable for global clinical development, whether it's truly innovative, and also be very careful on their development strategy and their team, because at the end of the day, people will do their work with the right strategy in place. In that regard, that probably will increase the, I would say, the successful rate for investment.
And Xin-Yuan?
That's a very interesting question. Also, hit my heart. I would tell you, and just in this week, we are signing SPA for 5 million American dollars into my company. So the reason they invest in me, because they see the potential. Particularly, we're going to using this money for the clinical trials in the United States. So we have this ability. We have 2 FDA approved R&Ds. So that's been well prepared. So the venture capital and see great, this is a great opportunity. Maybe our company can spearhead into United States market. Indeed, we have a new drug, actually very innovative drug against the JAK-STAT. If you ever heard this, it's the first drug against the STAT. That's we are going to have a clinical trial for coronavirus. This is for this so-called cytokine storm or this inflammatory syndrome. This actually kills the COVID-19 patients, but there is hardly any drug. We have the drug against this DNA replication, the vaccine and so on. But for the effective drug to inhibiting this killer, this inflammation, this cytokine storm, And we think we have the best one. So that's why investor invest us. But I want to talk to Whitney if we can collaborate to see is there opportunity we can work together. So that's the great. I one summary saying, if you have international program, if you're really strong in science, that's our strength, and you have an innovative aspect, the investor would looking at you very carefully. But if it's just a local market, that's another problem story. You know, you have the still Chinese said a lot of companies interested in saying China market is big enough. We are, you know, good enough already. But I want to talk to them saying, no, probably this now, this jicai, I don't know how to translate it into English, making the price so low, it's hardly making profit, particularly for innovative drug. So international market is definitely the future. And that's I encouraging investors and also entrepreneurs, really when the beginning, you should, you know, starting with something really, really innovative and have a open-minded. That's my view.
I do think that is correct, because with the push from the regulatory and the government support, a lot of right now, China are really pushing for innovative drug. And when we are doing right now, you can go to our company website. We already finished 2 rounds of series financing with a close to 120 million US dollar. And every time when you talk to investor, they always ask, is this drug going to go for global? And of course, we already got the ODD from US FDA, and we will get some more news, hopefully by the end of this year too. So I think it is correct that if you have the mindset setting like this, and I think Xin-Yuan product is important too. If we are talking about, for me, it's gene therapy, I cannot charge China 2.1 million US dollar for one injection. So where can I get that the revenue coming? I'm going to go back to US and get the money from them
Exactly.
too. So I think this is really huge opportunity for China. I do agree. I think we are almost finished, and I think maybe each one of you have one or two sentences to get a conclusion. I'm going to start with Xin-Yuan here.
This is a wonderful opportunity. I said I'm a student. This really learn a lot from you guys, and we hope we are going to be pioneers, and both in the United States and China, try to see how this ICH can really unite it, you know, these two countries particularly, but also with the world.
Hi, Roger.
Yeah, I think this is, you know, I'm so glad to hear opinion from the rest of the panelists. To me, this is also a great learning. I learned a lot, and also want to take this opportunity to thank the meeting organizer, BayHelix, MSQ, for this opportunity, invite me join this panel. Thank you.
Oliver.
Yeah, I think, you know, just as I said, you know, it's the drug development work is really a teamwork. You need a science, a clinician, and also the regulatory expertise, and also commercial expertise. Ultimately, we need the money. So without any lack of them, we just cannot do drug development. So,
Whitney.
Yeah, I'll just say, I think since joining ICH, we've seen, you know, monumental strides in the drug development landscape. I'm excited to see what changes in the next 2 years kind of continues to push that boundary as we see more and more approvals for potentially China-only or majority China trials. I also will just thank, you know, everyone else on this panel. It has been a learning opportunity for me as well, so I enjoyed it.
So I just want to thank you every panels, and also thank you for MSQ and BayHelix. And so for me, to conclusion, this is similar to everyone. I'm so excited with these new changes. There's gap, we will learn from that. But I can see that, I really hope that then we can also bring, instead of old time US IND first and then add China, why don't you do the other way? China IND and as US, add US and Europe. Yes. To win this way. And I'm hoping that I will be the first one to do that now, but I'm hoping that everybody will be more, and there will be more global trial and global drug development in the future. And can I, is echo here? I cannot see. Any question we can ask? Yeah. Or yeah. Go ahead.
Great, no worries. Thanks, Alvin, and thanks Oliver, Xin-Yuan, Roger, and Whitney for the fantastic roundtable discussion. And indeed, we learned a lot from your insightful talk about the future clinical trial landscape in both China and globally. And I'd like also thank you for all the audience for joining us today. So if you have any more questions, please feel free to contact us either via our website or WeChat. And thank you all of you again for your wonderful